The Modified Munson Training System for Grapevines, Grape Video 19. This presentation assumes a familiarity with the grapevine terminology presented in videos 1 to 5. We present this video for the benefit of growers who would like to grow table grapes in a temperate climate, such as in Michigan, New York, and other similar climates. This is not a training system that we advocate for wine grapes. Here is a seedless table grape vineyard several years ago in Hector, New York, in the Finger Lakes region of New York State. Back at that time, several growers, about 19 of them, formed a cooperative to grow significant tonnages of seedless table grapes in this cool climate. And the system of training that evolved was the Modified Munson training system we are about to talk about. Before we do that, I want to make growers who are interested in table grapes aware of a couple of publications available through Michigan State. This one, Table Grape Varieties for Michigan, is available through the website listed at the right here or by calling the phone number listed. This companion publication, Growing Table Grapes in a Temperate Climate, is also available from Michigan State University at the website listed to the right or from that phone number. If you go to that website, there'll be a search area and just put the word grape in there and it'll take you to all of our grape-related publications. If you're interested in growing table grapes on the Modified Munson training system we're about to discuss, it is presented in detail in this particular publication, so you probably would want to get a copy of this, and I think it's only around $6 or $7 for this publication. This is the original T.V. Munson training system for grapevines. Who was T.V. Munson? T.V. Munson is a famous American horticulturalist born in Illinois but spent most of his life and most of his productive career in a small college in Denison, Texas. So he is regarded as a Texas horticulturalist or viticulturalist, and he lived in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And he conceived of this three-dimensional training system with V-shaped posting with one central wire on which the grapevine was trained on a cane and then spur pruned for canes the next year. And then the shoots would be positioned out over the outer wires, as we'll go on to describe. Later, T.V. Munson modified his own original training system so it was just a single line post as shown here with a crossbar fastened to that line post, so it became a simpler system than originally designed. We worked with the modification of that training system. It is a three-dimensional training system in which we place long canes pruned out and tied to two inner wires, one on each side of the line post, and then the shoots are positioned early in the growing season out from those canes over outer catching wires as shown in this illustration. And here's what it looks like when the fruit is produced on such a training system. It has a wonderful display of crop. In this case, these are Concord grapes that were being grown for fresh market consumption. And you can get a sense of how uniformly the grapes are produced in a plane at the top of the trellis, with the shoots being positioned out over those outer catching wires. So if we start to describe the advantages of a modified Munson training system, we would start by saying, one, that the sunlight exposed fruit ripens uniformly at the top of the trellis because all the fruit is in a plane right at the top of the trellis, and that allows for a quite uniform ripening of the fruit. And secondly, because the canopy of the vines are so open, Modified Munson allows for good spray coverage of the fruit to prevent diseases and to control insects. Here's another picture of a seedless table grape. This one is Lakemont seedless from Cornell University, and you can see once again how nicely Modified Munson allows for the uniform positioning of the fruit zone at the top of the trellis. Well, another advantage of this training system is that it provides for easy hand harvest. You can well imagine that with all the fruit placed high on the trellis, it's fairly easy for people picking this fruit to find all the clusters and pick them easily into containers, as opposed to a training system that might put fruit randomly all over the trellis and then you have to hunt for each cluster to pick it. Let's go back to this trellis a minute. Here's a version of Modified Munson, and we have that crossed piece, which is a 2x2 ripped from 2x4s. I first have to tell you that the piece of 1x3 sticking up in the air is not part of this training system. It's a piece of wood that we put there for draping netting over the canopy later in the growing season to protect the fruit from birds. So that in itself is not part of the training system. But what I want to point out in this picture is that if you see how we constructed that crossbar, there are two metal brackets that are attached to the crossbar and then attached to the post, and they're fixed permanently so that the crossbar does not move at all year-round. Well, that creates some problems. Here we have people positioning those Concord vines that we showed you pictures of the fruit originally, and in order to position those shoots out over those outer catch wires, you have to reach over the top of the outer wire and grab the shoot and pull it out over the wire and down, and that takes some doing, and we found that there was a better way to do this, and so we modified this training system even more. Well, here's a picture showing someone tying the canes onto those middle wires on the trellis, and the outer catch wire is a nuisance. In this case, this fella has ducked underneath and has it behind his neck, but it's a nuisance to prune the vines in the wintertime because the outer catch wire gets in the way, and you either have to reach over the top of it or duck under it to be able to prune the canes to the middle wire. So for that reason, and because shoot positioning with that catch wire in place as it is also a challenge, we decided to see if we could make that a movable catch wire rather than fixed as we've shown you thus far. Here's a schematic that shows a crossarm system that we call collapsible. If you look at that post on the right side, the crossarms have been lowered so that the outer catch wires are now laying down against the line post, and that makes it a lot easier to do the dormant pruning in the winter, the tying of the canes onto those inner wires in the spring, and to do the initial shoot positioning of those shoots before we have the fruit fully developed. Here is, instead of a stiff single piece of 2x2 going across the line posts and out in both directions, we actually have a length of about 20 inches of sidearm, and on that we have bolted a piece of 1/2 inch electrical conduit. If you look carefully, very carefully, on the line posts, up where the cross arm is just about to meet the post itself, you can just see a small nail. That nail is put in at an acute angle, and when we raise that cross arm up, the end of the electrical conduit is pinned on that nail, and it sits there beautifully all season long. And it works so much better than if we had rigid cross arms with this system. So this is yet one more reason why we called it Modified Munson. So here is that collapsible sidearm after it's been raised, after the initial shoot positioning, and the arrow is pointing to where that nail is on the line post, and the conduit is pegged over the top to hold it in place. We did this many years ago, and we've used this for a long time, and it's been a really decent system for many, many years, and much easier than if we had had fixed cross arms. After we go through all those steps and have the shoots positioned, we then raise those cross arms from their collapsed position to what you see here, and now we have the full-fledged Modified Munson training system. Let's take a look at it in the vineyard. Perhaps it'll be clearer. And there it is in place, something like that. Now you can see the bird netting that we have placed over this entire vineyard. We're not going to talk about that today, but we have done that in some vineyards when bird pressure is very high, because we have zero tolerance for birds pecking on fresh market fruit. Here's a schematic showing the construction details of that collapsible sidearm arrangement for Modified Munson. You see it here. This schematic and more details about it are in the publication that we mentioned earlier. If we go back then to our list of advantages of this training system, we would add a fourth advantage, in that it is very compatible with shoot positioning, especially when you construct your trellis with these collapsible sidearms, as we have just shown you. Now there is something I put in, and it's at an odd angle, but this is a Concord grapevine trained to Modified Munson, and I put this in to remind me to tell you that when you use this system for table grapes, you must use long cane pruning. You cannot make cordons on those inner wires and spur prune them as we've done here. We tried it, and what happens is you just do not get the cluster configuration that you really need for fresh market grapes. The clusters are too straggly. They're not good looking clusters, and you can only get those if you stick with long cane pruning and not a cordon and spur pruning as shown here. So I wanted to tell you that if you go this route, you would frustrate yourself if you said, let's do cordons and just spur them back. It won't work for fresh fruit. And here is somewhat of an example of that. When we did spur prune, you can see that the clusters, sorry the picture's out of focus, but you can still get the idea that these clusters just don't have the configuration that you need to market this fruit fresh market. Okay, well, the disadvantages of modified Munson training, as we just pointed out, is that it requires long cane pruning and annual tying. You cannot shortcut that process by pruning to cordons and spur pruning those cordons. You must have a full-fledged program of long cane pruning to make it work. And that is true of table grape production in general, regardless of the training system that you're going to use, if you want really nice cluster configuration. Well, I put this picture in. This was taken quite a long time ago, and you can see only the row on the right has been trained to modified Munson in this commercial Concord vineyard. But you can see how all those canes were arched out nicely. They had been shoots out over that outer catching wire the previous season. So when we prune this out to long canes to tie again on the inner wires, this is what it looked like before we tied them in the spring. And we're a little behind schedule, I see here in this picture, because they're already budding out. Well, disadvantages, a second one, yes, there is a cost and effort to establish the three-dimensional trellis in this training system. But if you're going to be serious about growing quality table grapes, when you do this, it's going to pay dividends, and you're going to be thankful that you took the time to establish this training system for your table grapes. Because you're going to get stuff like this. This is not a fake Photoshop picture. This is the wonderful fruit that you are capable of producing when you take the time to get your table grapes on the right training system. Well, a third disadvantage is that you do have to do shoot positioning. It's mandatory to obtain the benefits of this training system. And you'll want to do some version of canopy management if you're going to grow quality table grapes anyway. So this is not something that you can avoid if you're going to grow quality fresh fruit. Once again, showing those now becoming canes of Concord arched out over the outer catching wires with all of the clusters hanging in a uniform plane for uniform ripening with the modified Munson training system. And there it is again in a schematic form, but you can actually have it look like this in your vineyard. So in summary, the advantages of the modified Munson training system for table grapes are that it produces sunlight exposed fruit that ripens uniformly. You can get good spray coverage of the fruit with this system. It's easy to hand harvest, and boy, that is a major advantage when you're dealing with fresh fruit. And it's very compatible with shoot positioning. Disadvantages, as we've said, it does require long cane pruning and annual tying. The cost and effort to establish the three-dimensional trellis is a disadvantage, and shoot positioning is mandatory to obtain the benefits of this training system. Well, that's it, folks. That's the end of this video, and this is the end of our video series on grapevine training systems. In our next video, we'll begin discussions on the very most important thing we do all year long in the vineyard, pruning, the most important viticultural practice, pruning, and we'll start that with the very next video. For now, happy grape growing!